It's an honor to live in this house because of the history, because of what this man stood for. The NAACP right now, he was one of the founders when it wasn't called that. It was called the Niagara Group. And he was one of the leaders and one of the speakers all the time. And he was so passionate about civil rights. He was just horrified when he didn't win in the Supreme Court, I can imagine, because he felt so strongly about it. He kept writing books. The Buttons Inn, it's named the Thorheim because he wrote a book about how he was such a fool going down to North Carolina, trying to change people in North Carolina. Had to leave because he had so many threats on his life. He was a carpetbagger, of course. They didn't like him in North Carolina. So he came here, practiced law, eventually ended up consul to Bordeaux in France, where he died. But a fascinating man. He was an author, he was a magazine publisher, he was an attorney. Parted his hair in the same way that I do, what little I have left. And that should be enough filming. Thorheim is the name of the house, and his wife Emma actually named the house. The house in 1881, when the two of them came here, they looked at this. They loved Mayville. There were only about 1,000 people here at that time. He loved fishing. You could clearly see the lake from here at that time, and you still can if you stand in the road. But in 1887, when they did a survey of this area, there were only 5 houses between here and there. And this was 30 acres. So he loved it. He could fish here, he could write here, he wrote his books here. And the house was never officially his, it was sold to Emma, his wife. And she owned it for the entirety of the 34 years that they were here. Left it then to relatives as a life estate, and it went on like that for some time. But it was Albion who lived here, his wife Emma, and their daughter Amy, sometimes called Nodie. And she died in her 30s. She was young. She also was an artist. And I have one of her paintings in here that I think nobody recognized because they didn't take it away from the house and put it in the McClurg mansion.
And when did you purchase the house?
In 1986. So I've actually owned it longer than Tourgee's did.
What motivated you to?
The history of it. I bought it from Dick Wilcox, who did a lot of the restoration on the house. The house had really been deteriorating for years. It was apartments. And it just went and went. The porches kept going off of it. They rotted off and so forth. The tower left. He put the tower on. He put the porches on.
Oh, wow.
He did a lot to the house. And I promised him when I bought it that I would continue that. And I have. I've restored the house as much as I can. We now live here. In the beginning I bought it, it was an apartment house. He didn't live here either. But I told him I would live here eventually, which is what he wanted to do. His wife didn't share that wish, so he never did. But we've moved here, my wife and I, and we've restored it as best we can, not to what it actually was, because it's not a museum, but we restored it as well as we could and still live in it in modern times. And I can show you some of the rooms and what they used to be and what they are now, because they're different. And the property next door where the library sits is where his law office was. That office is still here. It's behind the house. It was moved. So everything that he had here is basically still here, except for the barns and the outbuildings, because it was 30 acres that we bought. So there were barns, there was an ice house, carriage house, those things.
Probably safe to say, Ron, that the brief he wrote of Plessy versus Ferguson for 1892-93 time period was probably done right here.
Yes, it probably was. I can show you the office. It was either in his law office next door, or it was in what's now our dining room. What used to be his office.
So right here, where you are, is where he wrote.
Exactly. And his books. Oh yeah, everything was right here. And you know, that's why I love the place. Kids come every year. We give them a little tour because they come from the school. And other people come, they see the sign, they want to know if they can see the house. We talk about the house. I don't usually let people in the house. But,
It was Judge Ferguson's house that he built in 1866 in New Orleans.
okay.
Is the reason that I discovered that I was related to the judge.
Really?
But he was from Martha's Vineyard. So he built his house to reflect the architecture of Martha's Vineyard. So it is a very unusual house in New Orleans because it looks all gingerbread.
Oh, yeah.
And the owner, at the time that I learned about it, like 25 years ago, wanted to restore it also to its original condition, and was hoping to find family members that had photographs that he could use. And he said he'd been looking for Ferguson for 10 years before he landed on my photo. That's how I found out.
Wow.
1981, a copy of it, of course. And that made them interested in the house. They came to look at it, loved it. This talks a little bit about Plessy versus Ferguson.
What was that in?
He was in his office, he was right here.
Is it okay to take a picture of it?
Sure. It's not an art gallery.
Why, there is a picture, a very nice picture of him at an office desk. Would that have been, do you think, in this location or as
I
office?
don't know what picture you're...
Well, I know that. I have a vision of it.
I've seen both. Those are the original windows that were here. Yeah. Hand-painted stained glass.
When did you buy this? How long ago?
1986.
Wow.
Any story behind those glass windows, you know?
Not a good one. I had a tenant in here once that liked to throw basketballs on the wall and broke one of those.
Oh, no, okay, that's not,
I won't
that's,
even tell you how much it cost me to have it repaired.
oh my gosh.
Come on.
None of that's easy.
You have to get larger lumber.
Take
Mill
it
it
down.
down.
No, exactly. None of that's it. You find what you can that was original.
Part of the Tourgee estate, which is now the library. And that is right contiguous to the office building, which was moved here, but the library was built. Beautiful place.
It didn't directly come to the library either, so.
It went to the Tuesday.
Yeah, but there were some problems and it ended up going to a relative in Canada who then conveyed the property back to get rid of the terms. It's,
They didn't want to call it the Tourgee Memorial.
Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
know.
yeah, okay.
So what do we have here? What is this, Devon?
Well, this is the newspaper clipping, final tribute, the funeral for Judge Tourgee. And it's from November 16th, 1905. And it gives quite a bit of information about it. But one thing that's stated is, of course, he died in France and he was cremated in ash. His ashes were sent here, Bordeaux, France. He was ambassador at the time, and his funeral was held without his ashes being here because they did not reach it here until later in the afternoon due to the trains missing the connection in Buffalo. But the services were held as planned. Of course, Buffalo, you had to come down to Brockton, get to Pennsylvania, come over to Mayville in that way. So that wasn't too unusual for connections to be like that were missed. And it just gives a few details that I've highlighted a few of. Business places, and many of the homes in the village were decorated with black draped flags. The Methodist church where the services were held was decorated with draped flags, palms, and a large number of floral offerings. Members of the GAR, which is Grand Army of the Republic, which was, if any of you don't know, the organization of former members of the Civil War. GAR members were present, were nearly 100. They met in the lodge rooms of the local post with the Ladies Relief Corps. Tuesday Club and colored citizens also met in bodies and all proceeded to the home of Dr. Belknap, where they accompanied Mrs. Tourgee and her daughter to the church. Reverend B.A. Glenda read letters from J.H. Bates and Corporal Tanner, Commander-in-Chief of the GAR, and a telegram from Booker T. Washington as follows. Scranton, PA. H.C. Smith and other representative colored men are to attend funeral. Regret engagements in West long since made prevent my attending. My race owes much to the courage and the helpful work of Judge Tourgee, which we will not forget. Extend to the widow my deepest sympathy, Booker T. Washington. The ashes were contained in a small stone casket, which will be buried in a receptacle in the family lot, over which a monument will be erected. Duty will be performed by the members of the Colonel E.F. Carpenter Post. And now the church up here that had his funeral is not the same church that is there now. That burned in March 1941. It was a big fire, and there's a couple of pictures here that show the original church. Just on the back of this, there's a picture of the Methodist church that he was buried in, up in flames. And there are a nice series of 11 photographs that were taken of that church in flames, which I've got copies of. 2 pages are the dedication of the Tourgee Monument in 1906. You got a copy there.
Is that the one in the cemetery?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'll just read a little bit here. A memorial sermon to the members of the Grand Army of the Republic Women's Relief Corps, delivered by Reverend B.A. Jander of the Methodist Episcopal Church Sunday morning, because that church was the one that Albion Tourgee belonged to. The services of the day were held in the Opera House, which was appropriately decorated for the occasion. That's a building uptown that's currently in bad repair. It's
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's what?
The Swetland building, I used to own it for over
Yeah.
30 years.
Oh, really?
I
Yeah.
didn't realize that Mayville had an opera house.
Can you read the inscription there?
Albion Tourgee, born Williamsfield, Ohio, May 2nd, 1838. Died Bordeaux, France, May 21st, 1905. I can't read what it says below.
Maybe it's in some other language, huh?
No, it's...
Okay.
Oh, you know what it is? It's Scottish Rites Mason. Because,
Oh, it goes
starts-
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is Emma. This is his wife.
Oh, okay.
And she died in 1915.
Same year Judge Ferguson died.
And the other side is his daughter, Amy.
The obviously big meaningful name was Tourgee, so Albion Tourgee was chosen, and that's why it's the Tourgee room. And now we've been guested with you guys, which is even more phenomenal. I mean, you're the real deal. So that's pretty impressive.
So do you,
Not to be here, to tell you the truth. been learning so much since we've been here. I'm amazed. I'm just trying to set up the next visit.
So do kids come and do you teach them about Albion Tourgee at all?
I will tell you the truth, that is not, no, we don't. But I mean, if someone asks, then yes, we will talk about it. But
Yeah.
we had his gavel, the gavel.
The children did love to play that, which is why it's not.
Now, you do have his books, or many of his
Yes.
books there.
Well, and there are actually a couple on the shelves that do circulate, so. But the Historical Society are the owners of that, so. What I would like to know is how this came together. Like, how did this all happen?
Do it come here?
And I got,
That you two were talking to each other, that you, just how did that
I got
happen?
the book.
Okay.
So you're the one who.
Oh, you're talking about this trip?
Yeah. Well, just like,
So-
have you,
Oh,
have your families always known
No.
each other is what I'm getting at.
Same city, born, same year, same age. I'm not telling. And
You don't have to tell, it's fine.
two different neighborhoods we grew up in. We never knew each other until
So what's the city?
North,
New Orleans,
where it
okay.
all happened. Where the
Okay.
Plessy case
I've been
happened.
there once. It was great, awesome
Yeah.
food,
Oh yeah.
phenomenal music.
Yeah.
And then Katrina happened 10 days later. Oh, wow.
Well, that was, we met right before Katrina, 2004, at a book signing, and I got the book that brought us together in the car. But the title of the book is We as Free Men,
Okay.
Plessy versus Ferguson, and the author is Keith Weldon Medley,
Keith
who
Weldon
visited
Medley.
Mayville to get the information about Albion Tourgee. He visited Martha's Vineyard to get the information about Phoebe's
Judge
relative,
Ferguson.
John Howard Ferguson. And of course, we all live in Treme in New Orleans, and I'm Keith's neighbor, basically.
Treme is a parish? Or-
So,
No?
yeah, well, it's wards.
Okay.
We divided up in wards instead of,
Okay.
you know, and it's parishes also, but the parishes are broken up into wards.
Okay.
And we're in the 7th ward, which is where the Treme community is. And Homer Plessy grew up, I think, blocks away from where Keith Medley lived. And, you know, some of the family stuff involved was his sister and his family would joke about him because he put 20 years of his life into the book. And they used to call him Keith Plessy. And they told him they were going to get rid of his last name and named him Keith Plessy because he was so upset
Adopted
with
son.
Homer Plessy. So when I finally met his sister, he surprised us, you know, introduced me and said, got somebody I want you to meet. I said, this is Keith Plessy. And she looked at me like she saw a ghost. She was like, really? You found a Keith Plessy? But they had already named him Keith Plessy. But that's how, and we became real close when I met him in 1996.
Oh, okay.
But
So
Phoebe
it's a
met
while.
him in 2003, something like that, right before we met. And he set up at his book signing the introduction of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
So
love
we
it.
met each other at his book signing.
I should write that guy's name down. And I
Yes.
should mention to Melissa that we really ought to have a copy of that and we should buy it.
Yes.
Video here. McClurg Museum.
That go over today. It's almost like an entrapment, or not really.
No, they staged the event
Yeah.
to bring the case forward.
How quickly
Right.
they do that today?
Oh, absolutely.
Would that, I mean,
that was
was that
the
a
precedent
tactic
for
in
Rosa
Rosa
Parks.
I mean, is that,
That's what the NACP used when they set up Rosa Parks to, you know,
go to the back of the bus and.
not go to the
Not
back of the
not the
bus.
back of the bus, but yeah, but to sit in the
Yeah.
bus.
Yeah.
Okay.
On
And
these
to
political
challenge
issues, I think they do that. I mean, look at Roe v. Wade, right? I mean, they definitely set up cases to put in line to bring up at the right time.
So they
to
could
that
get
case.
around the 14th Amendment, yeah.
Right. You know, they were talking in that movie about the New York State thing, how they sort of used the railroad even after. Well, I guess but that was before the Civil War, it was not allowed to be allowed, but it was still legal in Virginia, right? So they don't need it in that case.
You're in trouble if that gets.
That guy's pulling out the saw then.
There's a saw